Hello. Sorry for the slight delay. We were supposed to get started a while ago, but yeah, we'll get started shortly. Glad you guys are all able to join us. For those joining us, I know it's the holidays, so uh, you know, if you are free though, we are gonna be streaming as kind of usual, but we'll kind of get situated and kind of get comfortable and seated, and we'll get started shortly. Kind of show you guys how I usually go about doing self-critiques and the sorts. So yeah, sit tight. It's gonna be a good one, and maybe a good little break from the holidays. I know the holidays can be a little bit hectic sometimes with all the get-togethers, so hopefully this live stream here is a nice little break or breather from all the excitement of the holidays. But yeah, hopefully you guys are doing good. Hopefully people are enjoying their break though, nonetheless. Okay, I think I got everything that I need to have sorted. So we'll get started. So hello everybody and welcome to the live stream. I guess welcome to the holiday live stream here. My name is Josh and I'm one of the instructors over here at Wing Canvas. And if you don't know who we are at Wing Canvas, we here at Wing Canvas, our mission is to make art education easily accessible to everyone. So join us for free live stream lessons every week on YouTube. Oops, the script moved away. So join us every week on YouTube on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern and Mondays at 12 p.m. Eastern, and level up your skills with our community of art nerds. So glad you guys are able to catch us live here on the holidays. But if you are only catching us here on YouTube and you didn't know that we are also a school, well, guess what? We're more than just a YouTube channel. We're also an online school of illustration and visual storytelling dedicated to helping artists turn their passion into income. A huge shout out to our amazing students and members for supporting our mission. We love seeing your incredible artwork and watching you guys grow in our classes and weekly critique. And if you'd like to dive deeper, join our Discord and access stream notes and demos and exclusive artwork, art challenges, and more free resources to help you improve. So come connect with fellow art nerds and get inspired. So yeah, glad you guys are able to join us. I know it's the holidays, but glad you guys are able to spend your time at during the holidays here with us at Wing Canvas. And like the stream kind of mentions, I'm going to be essentially walking you guys through how I would personally kind of critique my own pieces. What are some things that I go over? What are some things that I personally look for? Now, when it comes to self-critiquing, the list can kind of be whatever you want it to be. It can kind of go on and on for like things you want to check off, things you want to look for. So if there are some things that I don't mention here in this checklist of things that I use to self-critique, be sure to mention them in the comments. I'll be kind of interested to keep an eye on and just kind of check out what you guys like to look for or how you guys go about self-critiquing. But hopefully some of the things that I do here, you can add it to your own list or add it to your own approach in terms of self-critiquing, because I do think that self-critiquing is a fairly useful tool and useful ability or skill to have in your tool belt when going over your pieces, because then you can improve gradually on your own time. And if you don't have anybody around you to give you critique, or you don't have anybody to critique your pieces, well, that's where self-critiquing comes in handy. So being able to do this is a very essential skill to kind of improving on your own time and also improving on your own skills. Now, I will say that self-critiquing can be a little bit tricky, and it can be a little bit different from person to person, because maybe one person might be much more harsher, whereas like other people might be a little bit more lenient on our own art pieces. So it really kind of comes down to you, but hopefully this live stream will kind of get you guys a good starting point or a good idea as to like what are some things to ask yourselves and go over when it comes to self-critiquing. And yeah, you guys didn't miss much. We did start a little bit late because yeah, there was a little bit of some technical difficulties behind the scene, just a little bit before we started, and I had to kind of adjust some things, but we're good and running now. So yeah, glad to see people in the chat and see some of you guys hanging out with us here. So yeah, and then Get the Feel says thanks for the video. Yeah, no problem. This was an interesting one. Kevin brought this up to my attention. It was like, hey, do you want to do a self-critiquing video and kind of like go over like, oh, what are some things you would kind of look at when you're looking at your own pieces to give yourself feedback? I'm like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I love doing that. I mean, I naturally love giving myself feedback, and so I was like, sure, yeah, I'd love to do this. I looked up. Oh, let's see. Hello, are you on Kara or Kara? I saw the drawing from the cover on it not too long ago. Kara, is that a social media? I don't think so. Well, I guess the fact that I have to like ask it, I guess I'm not on it, but I haven't uploaded these pieces ever publicly, so like. And it wouldn't make sense because this piece on the left is actually like brand new. Like I only started working on this a few days ago, but that's yeah. So I'm not on Kara, but yeah, and these pieces I've not uploaded. So maybe it's just a similar style or similar looking kind of approach, but it's kind of cool. Oh well, these pieces are also like based on just like photos on Pinterest that I found. So maybe we're all just doing the same kind of what is it? The same kind of study. Yeah. The bird one. Oh yeah, I did the bird piece too. Yeah, I did the bird painting that's found on the thumbnail of this live stream video. That one was also just a study from a picture on Pinterest as well. So yeah. So I guess we'll get started. Because of a little bit of the technical difficulties and also just gathering all these images to get ready for the stream, unfortunately I'm not going to have the time to shout out the art challenge, but just in case any of you guys are kind of curious or interested, every month on Discord we have a monthly art challenge, and this one's a little bit special because it is in collaboration with XP Pen, and so it's actually a competition. So everybody can join it. Anybody can join, whether it's digital or traditional. Feel free to submit it. There is a link. I don't know. Well, I see Kevin here. Hopefully Kevin can throw in the link if he's able to. But yeah, there are a little bit of some rules as to like what the competition is, what are some things that you'll need to kind of keep in mind as you're coming up with the drawing. But there is some time left, and the reason why I'm bringing up this competition is because instead of the usual art challenges that we do, our art challenge is this competition alongside XP Pen. So if you want to participate it, you still got a little bit of time. I believe the competition goes till I think the end of December or something. Don't take my word for it. Definitely check out the website for the submission deadline date. Because I do know that the judging, which I am a part of, is coming up soon, so I have to kind of get ready to start looking through all the submissions. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. But yeah, like I said, because of the little bit of technical difficulties, we didn't really get to. I didn't really get to look at the current submissions and throw them up here on the stream because we usually shout out our community for the art challenges. But I guess for now we're just gonna jump right into it. So yeah, if any of you guys are just hopping on, you didn't miss anything. I just put these images here as just a stand-in images. These are like I think my two most current pieces that I'm working on right now. So I haven't had a time to critique it, but I do actually want to go over these pieces and critique it because I feel like that's kind of in theme with what we're doing. But we're not going to start off with these pieces first. We're actually going to start off with some notes, some things that I like to personally go over when I'm critiquing myself. And so we're going to do the good old checklist approach and kind of just go over some things that I look for. So number one, I'm gonna kind of also break these into like different categories. So for those, I guess you can kind of use this checklist in different ways depending on how you're drawing or how you like to draw. But I think that you can probably start off with what I like to call a more passive way of self-critiquing. Now, we're gonna start off easy because essentially passive is a very Maybe let's move this over a bit. The passive approach is one that any one of you guys can do. It can be something that you don't really have to do too much. It's just simply taking a look at your piece and evaluating it from a little bit of a distance. Josh's favorite part of art is critiquing himself. He gets to go and he can be the only one that is upset. Yeah, so I guess the reason why maybe Kevin asked me to do this stream is because I love self-critiquing. Maybe I'll go into a little bit as to like what are some more, it's not really intense, but how I personally like to do it. I don't recommend it necessarily for everyone to do this, just because it's a very particular thing that I like to do, but maybe you guys like to do it too. But I'll kind of save it for the end of the stream to kind of mention like what it is that I do to self-critique. But the first thing that I do is what I would call the more passive way of critiquing, and this is because you don't really have to do too much. And these are things that you guys are all probably actually quite familiar with, and it is trying to look at things from a different perspective. I don't know why I changed the lower caps to upper caps, but we'll keep it that way. Perspective. Looking at things from a different perspective. So this can be things like zooming in and out. And I'm basically going to approach this kind of like a bit of like a checklist approach. So feel free to kind of save this, or I will upload these notes afterwards after the stream is done onto our Discord. So if you kind of want to save these images afterwards and use it as a checklist for yourself as you guys are drawing and you want to critique yourself, then I do recommend kind of having this checklist maybe off to the side to kind of refer to. But zooming out is a really good one that I love to do. This can either be you walk away from your drawing, or you just like literally digitally zoom out. Digitally zoom out. And I find that zooming out is like a really good way, because sometimes when we're zoomed in, we see the piece in one particular way. We get really caught up in the details of the eyes. I notice that I do this myself personally. And actually, while I'm talking about this, maybe let me see if I can grab a piece where actually I think I can show it with one that I already have saved here. So this is a piece that I did for XP Pen. I'll go over why I have two different versions here. But a lot of the times when I'm doing a drawing, I'm more of a portrait drawer, or I'm more of someone who likes to focus a lot more on the details and the faces and like the really zoomed in details of the face. And so when I'm drawing, this is kind of how close I am to the drawing. I'm super zoomed in. I'm like looking at like the little tiny nuances and details of the eyes. It's a little bit pixelated now because the file that I'm working on for the stream is a little bit smaller, but the file itself is like, this one is huge because I wanted to put in like a crazy amount of detail and make sure that the fidelity and the cleanliness and the sharpness of the line work for the hair and the face is like as detailed as I could get it to be. So usually when I'm doing line work and I'm drawing characters or faces, I like to be like super zoomed in, and I like to look at like how does the face look like zoomed in. But the thing is, when we zoom out, all those details, we lose all of that noise. We lose all those details and nuances. All the little bits of shading here around the eye, all the little kind of cracks and kind of eyelashes details around here, the shape of the iris, the kind of little white line cutting across the eyes, even like the small pieces of hair that's kind of cutting across her face. Like if I zoom out, we lose all of that detail. So when you zoom out, you start to see the picture as a whole. And what I find is that when you zoom out, you kind of pick up on some slight proportion errors. You'll kind of notice like, oh, the eyes look okay when it's zoomed in, but when it's zoomed out, the eyes proportion, maybe the spacing of it, maybe the size of it, it just doesn't look quite right. But it looks okay when you're zoomed in. But when you go far away, you'll notice things don't look exactly the way you thought they did. So I find that zooming in and out every now and then is a really good way of catching yourself before you commit too closely to the proportions. So it's a really kind of easy thing to do. This is why it's in the passive category, because you don't really have to actually do too much. You're just zooming in and out just to check whether your drawing is looking properly, especially in the rough phase. So maybe this is like something that I'll kind of notate here. So zooming out, and then I'll go like in the rough phase. So if you guys don't know what the rough phase is, roughs are essentially kind of our planning stage. Zoom in, rough is kind of like when the drawing is really, really rough. The drawing is kind of like not too clean and everything, but there's still room to make changes and there's still room to make adjustments. So that's why we call it the rough phase, because we're not going too detailed. We're not trying to be too committed yet to where everything is being placed and where everything should be going. So that's why we call it the rough phase. And I find that zooming out, this approach is really, really good when you do it during the rough phase, because you can kind of get an idea as to whether the proportions are right and the placement of facial features are where they should be. So yeah, so that's why I wanted to use this example, because this is one where I did want to put a heavy amount of detail in, but then I'm like, when I draw, sometimes you'll notice this in some of our videos where I'm the one in charge of that video, where I'm kind of like narrating and teaching the lesson for our videos. You'll notice that during the B-roll side of things, I'm always zooming in and out. And I also always sometimes have to mention that to the editors, like, hey, by the way, I zoom in and out like a lot, so I don't know if you want to edit around that or anything. But the reason why there's so much zooming in and out is because I'm always doing that to check my drawings while I'm drawing. So yeah, zooming in and out, that's a very important little tip that I like to have personally for myself. So let's minimize that and put that up here. So the next one, this is one that you guys are probably all very, very, very familiar with, and that is flipping your piece upside down. Upside down. Now, this is not the most popular or commonly mentioned one, but I do think that this kind of helps still every now and then. And remember, the main goal of these kind of ways of critiquing and checking is for you to change your perspective. So the reason why changing your perspective works so well is because when we're drawing something, we're so used to how something looks, and when we're drawing, our brain starts to get kind of comfortable and it gets kind of used to how we want things to look. And when we flip things upside down, kind of like this, we see it in a brand new perspective. We see it from a brand new vantage point. And so things that maybe never stood out for me start to kind of stand out. It's like, oh wait, I didn't know the eyes look like that, or like, oh, the proportions of the face are much longer or shorter than I thought it was. So when you flip something upside down, it's just also a really quick way to look at something or look at a drawing from a brand new perspective, to help you kind of check things like proportions and whether the design or the flow is looking the way that you want it to look. So maybe I'll write it down here. It's to help check proportions and help you kind of check the flow and design. And this one I would find that is pretty good in the rough and final stage. So I would recommend using this kind of check to do both during the design of your drawing, both in the rough stage and in the final design stage. And then lastly, we have the most common one that everybody loves to use, and myself included, and it is the mirroring effect. Again, this is a very useful one because it lets you see your drawing and your character from a completely different perspective and point of view that you would never really see. Again, is to break the kind of comfortability and the I guess, yeah, just the comfortability of seeing your drawing in a certain way. So when you flip the drawing, you finally get to see it in a way that's a little bit different. Mirroring is kind of interesting, though. I would say that mirroring is a much more effective way of tracking whether or not your drawings proportions or things look the way that you think that they should look. The problem, though, is that this can be really overused. So this is something I'm gonna just write here: try not to overuse. Because remember, the reason why changing your perspective works so effectively is because you're not used to seeing your drawing mirrored. You're used to seeing it like, let's say, angle or perspective A, like this. This is perspective A right here. Oops. Yeah, the way that we're looking at my drawing right here, this is like, let's say, viewpoint A. And then when we mirror it is viewpoint B. The thing, though, is like when we're drawing and designing our characters, we're very used to seeing how they look like from viewpoint A. And so when we flip it and see it from viewpoint B, it's like, whoa, that's so different. It looks like a brand new drawing because our eyes and brain aren't used to seeing it in the way that we're seeing it. And but if you kind of repeat and keep mirroring your drawing over and over and over and over again, the problem is that your brain starts to get kind of used to seeing it from a mirrored perspective. Or at least this is what I find for myself, is that the mirroring effect starts to be ineffective if I keep doing it over and over again. So I usually try to save it or use it when I really need to. So again, during like the rough designing phase, and also maybe at the very end of the final, or like maybe halfway through the final process, and then one more time near the end, like the final stage when you think the image is done. So you get to finally really see it from a brand new vantage point. So I try not to overuse it too much because I do find that your brain kind of starts getting familiar with what it should look like mirrored, and the whole point of mirroring it is to shock your brain into thinking like, oh, that's a brand new drawing, and then you're able to pick up things that are wrong or off about it. So I try not to use it too much, but it is still a very effective way of critiquing or judging or checking whether your drawing is working or not. Okay, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them or cover them as best as I can. And I'm just gonna take a quick coffee drink, and then we'll continue on to the next part. Okay, so this was like a more kind of, I guess, the more I shouldn't say active, but this is stuff that you're kind of actively partaking in, or yeah, you're kind of doing something in this passive stage. The second one, the second thing that I find very useful, especially if you feel like you're stuck, or if you feel like you're really kind of lost, is to step away from your drawing. Step away. Oh, whoops. Let's put this like here. Step away. So give it a few days. Or maybe even like a month. Basically, give it as much time and space out yourself from the drawing as long as you can. And what I find is, like, when you space yourself away and you come back to it, you're seeing your drawing from a brand new vantage point and a brand new kind of you have almost like a brand new opinion. And the other thing too is that if you space yourself away from a drawing for maybe, let's say, a month or even a year, and then you come back to the drawing, you hopefully, if you continue drawing and hopefully you continued kind of keeping up with your drawing skills and sharpening them and learning new things, the cool thing is that you always come back to the old drawings and be like, oh man, I would love to redraw this, but I want to reapproach it differently. Because now you're able to kind of see things or see kind of imperfections or maybe errors that you did in your attempt of the drawing, but much more clearly now. Because you've gained more skills, you've gained new knowledge about how to draw. So stepping away is always like a good thing to do, and it's something that I feel like some people need a reminder of every now and then, because when we're working on a painting, we get so caught up on it. We get so like, oh, I gotta really work on my drawing. and I really want to fix it. I know that there's all these problems in it, and I want to keep working on it. I want to keep fixing it. But sometimes it's also a good idea to just step away, give yourself a little bit of a mental break from that piece, and then come back to it later. Now, obviously, sometimes this is maybe easier said than done for situations or scenarios where you don't have a deadline, or it's not a commission piece and it's just a personal study. But if it is a commissions piece, or you do have a tight deadline, then obviously then maybe this approach here might not be the most effective, but you can still do this. Maybe step away for like an hour or two is also a good idea as well. So yeah, but you can't get back into that drawing. That's a good question. So I'm assuming that the question is like, what if I step away but I can't go back to that drawing, or maybe I just can't draw anymore? And then I think that's still totally okay. There's a lot of pieces that I've kind of started and I've just kind of lost motivation to. But then there's other pieces where I've kind of left them for maybe about a year or two, and then I come back and I'm like, oh man, there was something really cool there, or there was an idea in that drawing that I want to pick back up on. And I'm going to show you some of those drawings as well. And I can kind of show you like where some things have changed, where some different approaches and mindsets have kind of changed as I've kind of put those pieces down for a bit. But it's going to be a little bit of a different approach for everybody. Everybody's mindset on that is also going to be a bit different. But I think walking away is, again, giving your brain a little bit of break, just like how the one of you guys is saying, is like, if you give yourself a break, your brain has a little bit of a break and can be used for other things as well. So yeah, you're giving your brain a little bit of like this little gap so you can come back to it a little bit fresher in a way. So yeah, so these are kind of just the passive things. Now we're gonna go to what are some active things that I kind of go into when I am critiquing myself. And I'm gonna show you some of my own personal pieces as well. We're kind of going through just the written portion, the lecture note aspect, if you will call it, something along those lines. But then we're gonna go into my own drawings, and I'm gonna show you how I would critique these pieces that I have kind of gathered from my computer, and I've put them all here for you guys to look at, so you guys have examples of how I would critique and look at my own personal drawings, which I believe is probably what Kevin wanted me to do, which is to just show my pieces and then give my pieces critiques as well. Okay, so the second or the next part is, I know this is maybe not as exciting or not a big jump, but I'll call this semi-passive. So remember, passive basically, in my opinion, or my approach to think about it, is that the passive approach are things that you don't really have to do too much. You're just kind of stepping away, flipping the camera, rotating it, zooming out. Like, they're very minimal things you have to do. Obviously, like, you're gonna have to maybe make changes to the drawing itself, but the way to check whether your drawings are working or not, the checking process or the act of checking it, is a very passive thing to do. Oh, this is a good question. You have a drawing that you did back in 2020, hadn't touched it until this October, and I finally went and finished it. Nice. Yeah, exactly. That's an awesome example of one where sometimes just time, you just needed a little bit of time away from a certain drawing. Also, maybe that question was more meant for the person who gave that example, but I guess I can answer this too, which is like, sometimes is it easy to jump back into a drawing? And I think that it depends on what the drawing is, and it depends on like how emotionally attached you are to that drawing itself. I find that sometimes if there's a drawing where I was really excited for, but then I had to just put it down because I just wasn't feeling it anymore. If I look at it maybe a few years later, I'll be like, oh, actually, I've been really meaning to jump back into that drawing, but I'm just not feeling it right now. So it kind of sometimes depends on just how you feel about something. But yeah, so the next one, so again, passive is just like very little, you don't have to do too much. And then the next one here is what I will call semi-passive. This one's a really short one, And that is because this one is checking compositions. So the reason why I put this in the semi-passive is because you are gonna have to do some work when you do this. So checking composition, and the three things is tangents. Like this is like a big one. I feel like whenever me and Jesse haven't done a collab stream in a while, but I remember every time we did a collab stream, the first things we would just like always spot and look for are tangents. And there's so many times when students submit things where there's just tangents everywhere. Now when it comes to a like character drawing, it's a little bit harder to have tangents, but you can still have tangents. And if you guys don't know what tangents are, tangents would be like if this was my sheet of paper and this is how I cropped this image. Maybe like let's say like right here. And let's put it like right here. So the tangent spots would be right here, right here, right here, and right here. And tangents are essentially just places where the subject is a little bit too close to the border of your canvas or your digital drawing space. So if the orange line that I've drawn here is like your final frame, this is like when you export your drawing, the size of your piece is where the orange lines are. Well, guess what? Your character's, the top of the head is touching the top of the page and it's a little bit too tight, or it's a little bit like just touching it. Even if you leave a little bit of space, but it's like really, really small, it's still considered a tangent. So give a little bit of space on top of the drawing so that like maybe it's like up here. And same thing for the hair here as well. It's like cut off, but it's kind of hard to tell. It's like, is the hair gonna keep on going over to the right? Like, does it extend farther off the page? Or did you kind of like slice the piece? Or like, did you cut and crop the image like right at the edge of the hair? So it's like, it leaves things a little bit almost ambiguous for the viewer to kind of evaluate for themselves. And so again, it's always just about like giving it a little bit of space, moving it off a little bit, just a bit, just give it a little bit more height. And this is an example of one where like you have a tangent, there's a little bit of space, but it's just a little bit too tight for comfort. It's a little bit too zoomed in and cropped too tightly towards the face. So again, it's about just giving a little bit more space to your subject and the things that you're drawing. So tangents is a big one. Me and Jesse love to harp on it because it's a very easy thing to fix and a very easy thing to just catch. You just have to remember to check it. So again, this is why I'm writing a checklist for you guys, so you guys can like save these images afterwards and like take a look back at your drawings and see if you have some similar kind of quote-unquote errors in your own drawings that you can kind of easily fix. And if your Vin, never check your values. Also, hello Vin, glad to see you here. Haven't seen you in a while. I see that you're able to catch us while we're on vacation, or not vacation, on during the holidays. But let's see. I don't think you have to force yourself to finish your drawings. I think you can definitely like pick and choose, because I would say that sometimes the reason why I don't go back to old drawings sometimes is just that my perspective or my mindset has changed on what I like to draw, or my interests have changed, my style or approach to drawings have changed. So old drawings just might not kind of check those things anymore. So sometimes you don't always have to finish every single work in progress piece that you had, but if there's one that still resonates with you, that's kind of maybe what I would think about or consider before jumping back into an old piece. Is like whether you still feel invested in that piece, or whether that piece still kind of speaks to you in terms of like wanting to finish it or not. Yeah. I scream tangent like Mr. Crocker when I simply see one in my stuff. Yeah, you know what? I guess if you need to like really spend some time to check for tangents, definitely go for it. Yeah, but honestly, tangents is one that is very easy to catch in the very beginning. So if you do any thumbnailings or roughs, you should be able to catch where potential tangents can be and where tangents are already there. So if you already have tangents in the rough, just make sure to change things, change the composition, because I know that that's kind of where tangents appear. Tangents kind of show up when there's a little bit of a back and forth between the idea and the composition. And so this is where you're just going to have to balance those two things out, because sometimes the idea is like, oh, I want this character and it's going to be next to like a chair and it's going to be in a castle and there's going to be these like drapery carpets rolling off the side, and then there's this character coming up upon the throne and everything. Like, you just have all these crazy ideas and characters and stories that you want to tell, but you then also have to make sure that it matches the composition and that it works effectively for the composition. Because if there's too many tangents all over the place, then it actually kind of ruins or it kills the momentum that is there in the piece, or it kind of stifles the storytelling and the character designs that you put so much effort and time into designing. So you're gonna still, this is where composition comes in. It's always like kind of finding that balance between ideas and your composition and balancing those two things out. Okay, so tangents is one of them. The next one is flow. So flow is one, I feel like maybe this one's a little bit easier to describe when I get to some of my pieces, but it's kind of similar to composition. But this one is going to be very, very specific and different for every single person, depending on what your style is and what you like and what you don't like. But flow is how you keep the visuals interesting. It's kind of how you make sure that your drawing isn't too stale or stiff. Flow can help guide and lead the eye around the piece. And this goes into kind of like the third one here, which is hierarchy of information. Hierarchy of information. And I love this kind of term here. This was kind of brought to my attention, I guess, in university. I'd never heard this term before until university, where teachers were kind of teaching us that, like, when you come up with illustrations, try to always look for, like, what is your primary focal point. So it should always be your primary, then it goes to secondary objects or subject, secondary, and then it can go to your supporting elements, and then it can go into maybe let's just say like colors and lighting. So hierarchy of information is essentially kind of figuring out, like, what is your primary focus? What is your focal point? What is the first thing you want viewers to look at? And how can you make sure that you lead the viewer's eye to that primary focal point? And you want to always kind of keep in mind and think of, like, what is your first thing and what is your secondary thing? Because if people are kind of confusing which is the first and which is the second thing, then your viewers are going to be a little bit confused as to maybe the storytelling or what it is that they're trying to look at. So by having a primary focal point, it might kind of sound a little bit like straightforward and is like kind of maybe even common sense to have a focal point. But when you have a focal point and a primary object and subject matter, then everything when it comes to composition is going to guide itself to the primary focal point. So your composition, the flow, the colors, the lighting, all of that is going to help point towards your decision making when trying to figure out, like, oh, where's the highest points of contrast? What are the brightest, most saturated colors maybe? What is the character that has the most elaborate design to them? Maybe the framing. Are they sitting in a throne and it's like framed by a window, like a stained glass window behind the character? And that is what drives the attention towards the focal point. Like, by just coming up with who your main subject is, all your design decisions, your composition decisions, all kind of figure themselves out essentially by just having a focal point. And it sounds very like straightforward and very like common sense, but in the thick of it, when you're in the moment trying to come up with an idea and you're designing things and planning things out, you kind of get lost in the moment. You kind of forget that you need to lead the viewer's eye to where you want them to look. So keep those things in mind when you're coming up with your ideas. So again, this is why I call it passive or semi-passive, because you are putting a little bit more work in here, but you're maybe not actively drawing all the time, but you are constantly like thinking. This is more like the problem solving part of art and design. So this is the semi-passive one, and again, I take a look at the chat and people are shouting to drink water, so I will drink I don't have water, but I got coffee next to me, so I am going to take a swig of my coffee. Just fixed a tangent. No problem. Let's see this. Don't treat yourself like the dead plant on your windowsill. You know what's funny though? It's that ever since I was a kid, my plants have never stayed alive. My plants have always died. You know, I don't know if you guys did it, but like in grade 1 or 2, during I think like science class, our teachers would be like, okay, you guys are all gonna get a little pot of like, I think a bean sprout plant. You guys are gonna take care of this and you're gonna water it and you'll see how long you can make it last. I'm pretty sure mine died after like 2 or 3 days. I just could never sustain the life of plants that are given to me. It's just not in my skill set to do. So yeah. Also, yes, coffee does not equal water. I don't have water. I usually do, but I kind of ran out and I've gone lazy and trying to refill my water. Yeah, I know, right? Like I would have friends who would water their plants and they would like have some leaves coming out. It would start sprouting. It would grow maybe like 2-3 inches. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Mine didn't do anything. Mine maybe had like 2 centimeters to it and then it died. And that's true though, Kevin. Like coffee is made up of water, a lot of water. So you know, some kids who grow whole trees, you know, at that point they're just gifted in growing plants. Okay, so now we're into the last part, and this one is the big one. This is the big kahuna. This one is the active one. So this is the one that I think takes the most amount of work, and that is why I've labeled this one active. So the reason why it's active is because now you're going to be trying to, these are things that I check a lot for my drawings, especially maybe in the final stages or leading up to the final stages, and it is things like proportions. And I feel like these are probably all things you guys already know, but again, we're just going through all these written notes aspects of it so that when we go through my own personal drawings, you can kind of see how I would apply all of these things to my own personal pieces and drawings. So this could be like the face structure and maybe like the figure mannequin. Also, hopefully everybody's holidays went well, by the way. Totally forgot that. I saw someone say happy holidays, so also happy holidays to all of you, and glad you guys again are all able to like join us on this like, I don't know, special holiday stream in a way. Hopefully you guys got some good shopping done. Don't know about you guys, but I have spent way too much on buying gifts for people, so I am done buying. I'm gonna really try not to spend too much or any more in the coming like probably like next few months or even year. Hopefully year. Let's just try to keep it to food. If I need to spend money, it's just to sustain myself with food. But yeah. Figure mannequin, and then the last one, I feel like these are pretty self-explanatory, and I feel like this is more like, again, this is why it's called active, because this is where I would be showing you guys how I would do this. So the fifth one here is redistribution of proportions. So this one's a little bit of a different one. Distribution of proportions. This one's interesting. I'll write it here as well. This one's more for in retrospect. So looking back, retrospective. Looking back. And I wouldn't really say that this is something to maybe add to your current piece, but it definitely is something to keep in mind of when you do your next one. Looking back to improve your improve future pieces. To improve future pieces. You know, so you gotta look back at what you did beforehand so you know what not to do and what to improve on for the next pieces. And this is something that I'm constantly reminding my students in our drawing and painting class, because I have some students who sometimes will come up to me and be like, oh, I feel like I did so bad on this piece, or this piece really just didn't turn out the way I thought it was. I tried this new thing out and it just didn't work. Or if we're learning like figure drawing and anatomy, they maybe tried out this new figure drawing technique that I was showing them and it just quite isn't clicking in. And what I always just try to remind students is just that if it's not working now, don't completely put it down or don't completely ignore it or kind of neglect it, because you never know if it might click down the line or it just needs some time to settle in or sink in. So always kind of like when you learn something new and you try it out, look at your piece that you did this new technique on and kind of ask yourself like, okay, what did I mess up on? What are some things that just weren't working out? And how can I implement those this new knowledge into my future pieces? So I'm always like looking at my current stuff to try to improve and work on for my future pieces. I know that might sound very like, I don't know, not philosophical, but like, ooh, wishy-washy mojo or something. But I think it really is a good mindset to have, is that like, if you feel like your current piece stinks and it's not so great, guess what? You're learning every time you work on a new piece. Like whenever you're working on a piece, you're gaining new knowledge that you can then apply to your future pieces to add on to those. So I do think that like this kind of stuff here is like a really good kind of almost reflective point. It's more of like something to reflect on your future stuff. Okay, and then this is like bonus. I'm gonna write it down anyways just for now. And this is not really like you don't have to do this, because I know that everybody is a little bit has a different take on this point that I'm about to make, and it is compare. I know that this is a little bit of I don't know if this is considered a controversial take, but it really comes down to how comfortable you are, I guess, when it comes to comparing your art to other people's art. So for example, me, I love competition. I'm a very competitive person when it comes to art. So I love comparing myself to other people's art, especially those who are like maybe in the animation industry or the video game industry. Even when I was school, I love comparing my art to my classmates' art. Not because I wanted to kind of boost my ego to be like, oh, I'm so much better than them, but it's more of like, oh man, that person did it so good. How can I get it to match that person? Or like, oh, that person tackled or approached drawing in a way that I would not have done that. How do I kind of do the same thing? Or can I implement the same technique or approach in my own drawing? So if you find that you're in the position where you are comfortable with comparing, or you don't get too discouraged when you compare, then I think comparing is actually a really, really useful tool when critiquing and judging your own pieces, because it gives yourself a little bit of a goalpost. So the reason why I compare is because it gives yourself a little bit of a goal post to aim for. It teaches you new techniques. I think it also can be a good kind of maybe, let's say, reality check, I think. So this was like a little bit of an advice from someone called Lulu Sketches. Wait, not Lulu Sketches. Oh, I forgot her name. I'm kicking myself right now for forgetting her name. She has like a very interesting name, because it like has like the word art, not literally the word art, but has like an art term in her name. If I remember it, I'll try to think of it. But this is an advice that she had, which was that if you're not too sure, or let's say you want to go into the art industry, like the gaming industry or the movie industry or even comic book industry, and you have a project that you love, that you are aspiring to, put your art into those pieces or into those projects. So for example, Tangled. I love the artwork that was done for Disney's Tangled. And her advice would be basically like, if you are not sure whether you have the skill set ready to be used in the industry that you want to work in or be a part of, drop your art into it and see if it can stand side by side, toe to toe with the pieces that you admire and that you love. And I thought that was like a really interesting kind of reality check kind of advice, because I think there's a lot of times where we're just not too sure. We want to get better and better and better, and we know that there's always room for improvement, but how do you know when like you're at a good point and that any other extra additional improvement is just cherry on the top? When do you know you have all the necessary bits of all the necessary technical qualities to let you into the industry that you're aiming for? And so her advice was to drop your drawings into those like art books or comics or illustration and put them side by side with some of your heroes or some of the people you really, really love. And does it like stand toe to toe to it? Does it almost kind of blend in or almost feel like it's adding to those other pieces that you admire? So I thought that was a really cool tip. But again, I think this tip is really mostly useful or good for people who are at a comfortable stage in their drawing. And I think this tip or self-critiquing note is good for anybody who's okay with comparing their pieces with others, because I know that not everybody is okay with it. I know that not everybody wants to compare their pieces to others, and I know that there are those who, when they compare, they feel more discouraged than encouraged. So that's why I put a little bit more of like an asterisk on this kind of note, because I love doing this. I love comparing my drawings to other artists, but I think that if you're in the similar mindset or if you're in a similar spot, then I think this is like a really good way of just kind of seeing where you're at. But if this mindset doesn't really quite apply to you, then that's totally fine. That's why this is more of like a bonus tip. So I'm gonna write here bonus. Oops. Bonus tip. So hopefully that made some sense, and I'm gonna try to see if I can remember who exactly mentioned it. But it's always Amanda Jolly Lines, I think is her name. I love her drawings, and I think this is Amanda Jolly Lines. That's why I'm like I remember like her name has like some art term into it. Yeah, I think her name is like Jolly or something. Or maybe it's like some combination of like two different names, but I think this is the artist that gave this advice. But it's weird. It's like she gave this advice to another artist called Lulu Sketches, or Laura Price. She also has like a YouTube channel, and she also does a lot of background paintings for animated films. And she had a YouTube video where she mentioned this advice that she got from Amanda Jolly Lines. And so now I'm sharing that advice to you guys, since you're here watching it, because I thought that was like a really neat kind of outside tip that I had never heard before, but I thought was like a really, really cool bit of advice that I quite like, and I still use to this day. So yeah. Goal post. I realize I spelled goal post in a really weird way, so I'm gonna recorrect the way I'm writing goal post. Goal post. To aim for teaches. So you are kind of comparing your art with those you admire in the parts of industry the industry you love. So that's like a little bonus tip for you guys. I feel like that was a lot of talking. Gotta drink some coffee. But how are you guys? Hopefully you guys are doing good. Hopefully some of these tips make some sense and get you kind of checking your own pieces. So now, with all the talking aside, we're finally gonna do some looking and critiquing of my own pieces, or show you how I would critique my own pieces. Some of these are kind of old, some of them are semi-recent, like maybe within like the current year, or 2025, and I think some of these are like really, really recent that I'm like literally working on right now at the moment. So yeah, you guys get a little sneak peek at some of my current projects, as well as some of like old projects that are not done for Wing Canvas. Actually, some of these are my personal pieces or personal studies that I've done, and some of them are pieces that I've done for Wing Canvas. With that being said, we'll start off with the first one, because I feel like this is a good kind of starter to show you how I go about critiquing and adjusting or fixing my own pieces. Personal Josh. All right, okay. Good night, raging pansexual. Hopefully you get a good night's rest. Bye bye. Let me see. Let's start. Actually, let me group all these notes together. Oops. So, this number one, the first piece over here is, this was done for our Wing Canvas and XP Pen collaboration, actually. So every week, or not every week, but every other week, some roughly around there, every other week, I do a workshop kind of for XP Pen on their Discord server. So if you guys want to check it out, guess what? Hop onto XP Pen's server and you can catch me on Fridays, where I do a little bit of some workshops. So, and I might be doing stuff like this as well. So if you guys want to kind of catch them, they're there on Discord. So this was the one that I did for the workshop, and for these workshops I have about maybe like around an hour and a half or so to plan out the drawing, do the rough, and then do as much of the cleanup I can. And depending on how hard or how tricky the drawing is that I decide to aim for, sometimes they can be very, very finished, and then other times they might be a little bit more on the rough stage. So this is an example of one that I finished and did on XP Pen's kind of workshop, but I like really, really loved the kind of pose for it. I remember that this was kind of using a reference, but I definitely like exaggerated the positions of the arm, exaggerated the design and look of the character a lot, to kind of make it work for this very dynamic, athletic drawing over here. But I really love the pose, and I really love kind of the expression that I had given her. But the line work was a little bit more on the rougher and thicker side, so I was like, you know, I really want to clean up this drawing. I really want to go all out for it. And I kind of wish I kind of found some examples of this, but I also don't have the artist on hand, dang. But there's a series called Eureka 7, so you guys can check this out maybe. So there's a series out there called Eureka 7, and is an anime and also a manga at the same time. I believe the anime was going on and then the manga caught up to the anime, or vice versa, and one of them finished before the other. And Eureka 7, I have the volume, or the kind of the compendium volume for Eureka 7, and in between each chapter there are these kind of like little character vignette drawings or sketches of the characters from the series, and the style that in which he does it is like really, really cool. I love the style in which the artist does these kind of like character sketches and studies, and they almost have this like pencil sketch, like, well, actually I think he does do them in pencil. They're these like just really quick pencil sketches that he does of the characters inside of the volumes in between each chapter, and I love just the style that he did them in. So this drawing here is actually a shout out, or a little bit of an homage to my love of those sketches, and also just a love to Eureka 7. I love Eureka 7, if you guys didn't know, was actually the first series that I ever finished from beginning to end on my own time. Like, I've always caught like Gundam here and there on TV, but I never like watched it all in one go. And Eureka 7 was like the first series I ever watched all in one go. Yeah, it's been a long time. Eureka 7 is a very old series, but the soundtrack and the opening and ending still, I think, one of the best out there. But yeah, this drawing here is kind of an homage to it. So when I finished the drawing for XP Pen here, I really wanted to kind of do the same thing here. And so one of the things that I kind of was evaluating when trying to like clean up or quote unquote enhance the drawing here on the right is that I wanted to make sure that the line work was like very uniform and that everything had kind of like a purpose or intention to it. So you can see here on the first one, let's just call this drawing A and this one drawing B. The line work is a lot more kind of coarse. It's a lot more rough, textured, and a little bit chunkier. And even though it worked really, really good for the 1.5 hours that I had to draw it, it's not, I wanted to make it a bit more, have a little bit more fidelity to it. So you can see here in the new one, my mindset going in was like, okay, I'm going to have very, very thin line work. And so I made sure that there's consistency throughout the entire drawing where the line work sticks to that rule. And I know that there's a lot of people, a lot of kind of aspiring artists, both on our channel and on Discord, who always ask, how do you improve on line work? And line work really just comes down to experimenting, trying out new studies, using new art or new line work techniques that you've kind of observed, and also having like an artist on the side that you are admiring or aspire to kind of draw like. So that's why I brought up Eureka 7, is because when I was drawing this piece, I was using that art style to kind of help curate and help kind of guide all my line work decisions going into this piece. So the hatching, this kind of hatching, if you've seen my drawings before, you will know that I do not do hatching like this. But the reason why I put this kind of hatching there is because I saw it in those studies and sketches from Eureka 7 in the manga, in those like character studies in between the chapters. So I wanted to implement that and include that into my drawing, even though it's something that I never do at all in my pieces. But I wanted to try it out. I wanted to test it out and see if I could include it in my own drawings. The other thing that I noticed too is just like his line work. It's very like thin. Most of the times manga and anime line work is very thin and there's a lot of finesse to it. It's very delicate almost and very uniform. So this was something that I tried to put in my own drawing here that I don't also really do for my own personal pieces. I love adding a lot of line texture and line weight. But when I went into this piece here, I really wanted to capture that kind of anime manga style of like uniform art lines and kind of this almost textured thin line weight that a lot of manga drawings have. So when going into it, I had to be very, very particular and meticulous in terms of deciding and figuring out what line weight I needed to carry on throughout this drawing. So yeah, those are just some things. Now I kind of went over zooming in and out with this piece here. This piece definitely, because it is a figure drawing piece, meaning I have the full figure on display here. This was one where I couldn't just zoom in on the face and call it a day. I had to make sure that the face looked good, the glove looked good, the hand looked good, and then also the whole entire pose. Does the shoe stand out in a way that I wanted to? Does the folds in the clothes, do they all serve a purpose? Because at the end of the day, I can zoom in here. I'm like, wow, there's all these like fold lines here. There's all these like patterns on the pants and on the socks and the shading on the shoe. But if I zoom out, I can't see any of that. So how can I make sure that the fold lines here and the patterns on the pants and all this textured noise on this character still stands out, even when it's zoomed out? Because I have to still consider the drawing as a whole and how it plays together and works together as a whole, and not just individually in different chunks and parts when zoomed in. So that's one thing that I'm constantly keeping an eye on when I'm working on my own drawings. Yeah, so zooming out was one thing that I used to check and make sure everything was just like working together. Now flipping upside down, this is something that I actually have never done for this drawing. Now if I flip this drawing upside down, maybe some things that I'm kind of keeping an eye on and looking out for is like, is the drawing still balanced? Especially for drawings that are very dynamic or action oriented or focused. The focus is on like a dynamic action. You want to pay attention to things like balance. So when I'm checking balance, I'm looking at like maybe where the center of the head is. or like the center of gravity for this character, and I would drop a straight line down. So maybe like it's close to here actually. And I just want to make sure that the center of gravity lands somewhere around the foot. So center of gravity doesn't always have to be around the face or around the chest. But it usually hovers somewhere around here, especially if the person is standing. And as long as the center of gravity line drops somewhere around the foot, your character is fairly balanced. So when I'm flipping it upside down, that's kind of what I'm looking out for, is just like, oh, when I was drawing this upright, I was so caught up in the design of the shoe, where the glove and the hand was. But when I look at it upside down, I can kind of look at it and be like, oh, what is this triangulation kind of composition that's happening with the drawing. So I'm like kind of tracking like how these things are all distributed, the symmetry of the piece, and kind of how it all balances itself all out when I'm looking at it. So flipping it upside down kind of gave it just like a brand new perspective. And then if I flip it, same thing. If I'm able to flip it, I can kind of quickly check just to see, like, does the face look like the way I want it to be? I feel like flipping it back and forth by mirroring it, the one that this kind of like check works the most effectively on is on the face. Because when we're drawing faces, we get so caught up on like how things look that when we flip it, it like almost makes the face distorted. So we can almost see it from a brand new perspective. So by flipping it, it's a good way to just check if the face looks the way you think it does. And I would say this part looks pretty good. So this is how I would check this one. And because it's a character drawing, the only points of tangents that I'm kind of keeping an eye on is that when I save or export this drawing, that there's enough kind of wiggle room around the character. So somewhere like around here, I think is how I've kind of composed this drawing. Maybe I've made it even like larger so that there's a little bit more room for the character, but this one I just want to make sure that there's enough breathing room around like the foot and around like the face, because these are kind of like the focal points of this drawing. I want to make sure that when people look at this drawing, they're kind of maybe starting like here, and then it goes to here, and then it goes to the foot, and then it circles back to the bigger foot. So I have like 3 points of focal points that I want the viewer to kind of like circle around. So this goes back to composition, goes back to tangents, flow, and hierarchy of information. I want the viewer to flow from one point to the other when they're looking at this character piece and this drawing. And because the shoe has the most amount of detail, it has the most texture and kind of contrast in kind of line weight, I'm pretty sure that most people are going to kind of hover around this area first. And then with the level of tinier details and also this higher contrast of like black and white, people are going to kind of come back to the face, because the thing is, even if you want the focal point to not be the face, it's hard for people not to look at the face. The face is just the thing that grabs the most amount of attention when you're drawing characters. So it's always going to come back to the face. So I had to make sure everything just looked good for the face, and then settles back at the foot. So even though the foot down here is like the tertiary focal point, I still wanted to make sure that the drawing was clean, everything made sense, and that the design of the shoe was consistent with this bigger shoe here. So this is kind of how I composed this shot. This is how I'm kind of like approaching it. And now the mannequin and the figure proportions. Oh boy, this one is a little bit of a trickier one. I'm not going to demonstrate on this one. I think this one I wanted to keep this more for like composition and like showing you guys the difference of studying styles. So if I was to compare this, I would grab like the image from Eureka 7, kind of study the artist who worked on that series. He also did Dead Man Wonderland, so the manga. He was the artist for it, not the writer for it. But I would kind of like look at his drawings and his style and compare mine to his, not to go like, oh, is mine better or is his better, but more so to just kind of compare and see if did I pick up on certain things that I wanted to include in my own drawing. So maybe like the face drawing style, the line work, does it kind of match the guy that I was trying to like study? And some things that I did was actually in the nose design. So I don't usually draw noses like this, But because he has like a much sharper way of approaching noses, I tried to include it into my character's nose design when I drew this character. So yeah, this is kind of how I would break down this piece. And again, as always, if you guys have any questions about how I'm analyzing or breaking down my pieces, or if you even have any questions about my piece that I'm showing you guys on screen, feel free to put them in chat, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. I might have to take a quick water break and go get some water, but yeah, hopefully you guys are all doing good. Okay, so on to the next one. So this one, I want to show you kind of how ideas can kind of like change over time, and how it's okay to kind of like reevaluate how you want to approach your drawings. So this one is really more just like, this was the first idea, and then let me see, it was kind of started here, then here, then here, and then we finally end up with the fourth final version here. So these are kind of like the kind of transition of ideas, and I think this one definitely used a lot of mirroring to check if the faces looked the way I wanted them to look. This one definitely played around a lot with like zooming in and out. So because the shape of the face, the curvature of the face, and the eyes played a huge part in this, and because of such a zoomed in part of I feel like I was zoomed in a lot when I was drawing this piece, zooming out was a big part in checking and making sure things look the way I thought they did. So this is a good example of like, when I'm drawing it, I'm like this close to the face, cleaning up the line work, cleaning up the shapes of the eyes, designing all the shapes and line work and the shadows here. But when I zoom out, none of those things look the exact same. And so what I'm usually checking for when I'm this zoomed out is the balance of values. I'm checking the balance of kind of contrast and kind of the spacing of things. So kind of positive and negative space. I want to see if like, are there enough details? Are the blacks and the shadows and the hair and in the neck, is it too much? Is it grabbing the attention too much? Or is it a nice balance and it helps offset the heavier line work and the blacks that are used in around like the eye area? So everything that I'm checking on when I'm zoomed out is to make sure that things are flowing and connecting to each other in a way that I want it to. Because sometimes when I was drawing this piece, I'll show you an example of something that I was doing that I kind of in the end took away from the drawing, which was that I was adding a lot more details into the hair. So I would add like maybe extra lines here. I added maybe like extra eyelashes, maybe some extra texture scratch lines around like the eyes. I think I maybe even like connected the ear to like the jaw a little bit more over there, and maybe even like a little bit more details in the hair. Like I would add these like closed up shapes and like the spirals, because she had a very like kind of like 1930s Chinese kind of old vintage aesthetic to it. And so I was like adding all these like details and hairlines and everything to this drawing. And I would maybe even like add a little bit of like some textures into the eyebrows. Maybe I had the lips come out a little bit more as well, and maybe some extra bits of line and details in the lips. And ultimately what ends up happening is that when I looked at it, even though like, okay, it didn't look exactly like this, but ultimately when I looked at it, I was like, it looks good zoomed in. Like all the textures and the noise and the eyes, like maybe I added like eyelashes here and here, maybe I added a lot more lines around here and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it looked good up close, but the problem was that when I zoomed out, all this noise started to blur together and it created too much competition with the focal point. So this is why like, this is one of like the easiest things that you can do to check your drawing and to just kind of evaluate whether you need more detail or less details. Because what I noticed was when I zoomed out, I just noticed that it was just too noisy. There's too much going on. So I ultimately kind of just deleted all those extra bits of details and kept it more simple and stripped down. What's the ideal canvas size for you? Depends on what I'm drawing. Typically, if I want to show off like brush texture and a good amount of noise, I work in inches just because I feel like that makes the most sense for my brain when I work digitally. So they're usually about maybe like 11 by 16 or 12 by 18, something like that. I think the biggest one might be like 14 by 24, maybe, at 300 pixels per inch, or maybe even I might even up it to like 400 pixels per inch. But you'll have to really make sure your computer has enough memory for it and it can run it, because the more you draw and the more layers you add to your drawing or to your file, the more memory the file starts taking up. So you'll just have to make sure that your computer just is able to run it. But I don't think the canvas size matters too much, as long as you're able to get the right amount of detail. So if you find that the drawing's too pixelated when you zoom in and you're drawing the eyes, then maybe just bump up the DPI, like the pixels, or you make the canvas a little bit bigger. Oh, this is a good question. I'm gonna try to think of an answer. I don't really have an answer off the top of my head, but I do think this is a really good question. Hope you're having a nice day. Well, thank you. I hope you're having a nice day as well. I wanted to ask how you would approach a learned mistake in art that becomes a habit. Ooh. That's a good question. Let me see if I have an example of one that I think I have. Maybe like gripping your pen too hard is one. I don't know if that counts or is the same kind of art mistake. Or even drawing. So like something that I kind of did was when I drew like faces, I would curve the lines a lot. Now, this is not to say that the face isn't curved or the mannequin face mask isn't curved, but it usually isn't curved this much. And it was something that I had to kind of remind myself not to do. Your face is not curved this much. You can curve it, by the way, but it just depends on your style and depends on how maybe accurate you want to be. Typically, though, I would recommend just curving it around the top, and then as it comes down, I would straighten it. And then you can curve it back down a little bit towards the chin, but I wouldn't curve it like this much. So when I'm drawing the face as well, like if I draw the brow line isn't really so much like this. It's closer maybe to just like a very subtle curve, especially if it's like a more level head angle, and if it's a head angle that is not tilting or looking up, or you're not like tilting it towards a shoulder too much, like it's very level-headed. The curves on the brow line and the midline are actually very, very subtle. They're there, but they shouldn't be too obvious. So I used to draw heads more like this, and what I end up finding is that it made more work for me because I had to correct things a lot more. I had to correct the proportions, the alignments and levels of like the eyes a little bit more. I had to kind of like readjust the brow line and the cheekbone placement a little bit more. But when you keep things a little bit more flat like this, I found that I mean, I still have to make adjustments, but it's less adjustments and it's less of a headache making those adjustments, if that makes any sense. But I feel like any habit you build, you can always break away from it. You just kind of have to be aware that you're making those quote-unquote drawing mistakes and be able to kind of remind yourself that this is something that you do, and that whenever you catch yourself doing it, to try to do it properly, approach the technique properly. So because when I'm drawing faces, I notice that this is something that I do a lot. I try to be more aware of it. I try to kind of pick up on that when I'm drawing faces, and then I try to implement this a little bit more when I'm drawing faces. It's easier said than done, but I think when you're more aware of it and when you're conscious about it when you're drawing, it's a little bit easier to then catch it. The problem is the faces as well, where I drew one angle so much that I began to perceive art slanted, and I can't draw a front-facing perspective very well anymore. Oh, that's you know what? That sounds very relatable. I think I I've gone through a very similar kind of problem, or yeah, as well, where it's just like I am very comfortable drawing 3/4 and profile views, but front facing, I hate doing front facing. It always trips me up. I definitely have to do a lot more kind of obstacle jumping, I guess, when it comes to drawing front faces. Um, but because I think going in, I know that I try to put in a little bit more effort and try to check things a little bit more when I'm drawing front faces, if that makes sense. Um, Now I understand why I have to adjust face proportions when I draw the head first. Yeah, and I think the reason why I also had this problem is because I would see a lot of drawings and I didn't understand why. So this is not necessarily wrong. When you're drawing a face angle and the head is tilted, yes, the brow line is going to tilt a little bit more and the face is going to curve a little bit more. But what you end up kind of telling yourself is that if you draw a head like this, you're telling the viewer that they are like tilting their head a little bit. But then if you're drawing it like this and the person is just their head is just straight like this, it doesn't really make sense. There's too much curves happening to the face. So if it's too much like this, your face is going to recede a little bit too much. So if you're curving the center line like this, you're essentially kind of saying that the face is maybe like this, and then the face is kind of like tucking in a lot. And again, not to say that this is a bad thing or that faces can't be like this, but if you're drawing a face and you're like not too sure why faces all look a certain way, or like why does the face like curve in too much, like it's curving a lot, a big reason as to why is maybe because you're curving the center line too much. So faces are actually a lot more flatter than you think that they are, or not you or anybody specifically or in particular, but just like the reason why we tend to think the center line curves a lot more or the brow line curves a lot more is because sometimes when we see drawings and we see the underlying structure look like this, we're like, oh, okay, it's always curving. Or sometimes when we see like artists do like an underdrawing, we see a lot of these curves and we like exaggerate it too much without understanding why they're curving. So by understanding or hopefully knowing that like most face, the center line and the brow line are actually a lot flatter, hopefully that kind of helps to straighten out the faces a little bit better for you guys. How do you make a classic Krita brush look so smooth and weighed? Oh, also someone asked, what brush is this? I wonder if there's something like it in Clip Studio. I have not used Clip Studio in a while. The closest one that I liked personally was kind of like the mechanical pencil, but even then it didn't really flow the way I wanted to. I have not spent enough time to adjust the brushes in Clip Studio though, to be fair. So I feel like Iggy might be the best person to ask because she uses Clip Studio the most. But in terms of Krita, yeah, like charcoal pencil medium is a good one. This one is also a really good one that I've been using a lot. So a lot of the charcoal titled pencils are ones that I use a lot. It's also just the drawing habit. Being able to move your arm just takes time and practice, and I think you can get most brushes to be smooth as well. Let me see. Oh, and also, yeah, Kevin is teasing. We do have a video coming out soon about brushes, so yeah, definitely subscribe if you guys want to be notified of when we have that video coming out. What you said about noise in art, do you think that applies to all drawing styles? I mean, ultimately, I kind of see noise as like either having noise or no noise. So as an example, like this is one where I would say there's not a lot of noise in this drawing because everything is very clean. My approach when I did this was to kind of replicate almost Al Hirschfeld's style. So if you guys don't know, there's an artist called Al Hirsch. Hopefully I spelled his name right, but this he has like an amazing style and approach to line work, and I try to replicate it in kind of like how I did my own, but I'm not copying him exactly, but I kind of try to implement his spirit, not like literally his ghost or spirit, but like the essence of like how he approaches drawings. And his approach to drawing is um, very minimal. He does not use a lot of line work. He does not have a lot of detail. So when I say noise, it doesn't necessarily always mean that you have to have noise. It can be both having no noise and having it be very clean and open and smooth and minimal. Whereas you can have also very heavy noise. So heavy noise is a piece like this. So this is a piece that I'm currently working on where there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of textures in the brush strokes. There's a lot of paint brush stroke directions happening. There's a lot of different colors and shapes and values happening all over this piece. So there's a lot of visual noise, and I want that visual noise when I'm doing this because I want it to be more painterly and kind of smooth in a sense. But if I'm doing a piece like this, I don't want there to be a lot of noise because that's not what I'm going for. So it really kind of depends on what you're aiming for. And ultimately, the way I see noise is there to help create kind of texture. And if you want something very smooth and digital feeling, then maybe you want less noise. You want a brush that doesn't have too much texture or blending effects to it, or opacity effects to it. You just want a clean, simple, weighted brush maybe, so it has less noise. If you're not doing any hatching or shading, that is also less noise. But the more noise you add to it, the more kind of sometimes detailed it is, the more kind of busy it might feel. And it's not, one is not better than the other. It just really kind of depends on how you want to texture your drawing. It's kind of like I like to compare drawing sometimes to cooking or sports. I feel like maybe this one, the best one to use is like cooking. So it's kind of like cakes. You can have cakes with very little icing on it, very little toppings and ingredients on top of it. It's a very clean, simple cake. But you can also add a lot of decorations to it. You can have like little sprinkles on it and fruits, and those creates more textures and more kind of visual noise to your cake. And if you like that kind of stuff, then you add more. If you like a more cleaner, simpler cake, then just add less toppings. And I think like drawing is the same thing. If you like something cleaner, then restrict the amount of visual noise you have in the texture of your brush, the amount of details that are there, less shading, maybe less colors. But if you love texture and you love visual noise, then pick a brush that has a lot of effects, has a lot of textures to it. Add a lot of details, consider the lightings and the colors and the amount of details you're going to put in the hair and the rendering of it. So it really comes down to what you prefer. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next drawing. Not that we have to go through every drawing, but we'll go through as much as I can. So again, this is another piece actually that I did for XP Pen's workshop. And I don't remember what this was for in terms of like the topic, but this was actually a drawing, a fan art piece that I did of Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim. If you didn't know, I love Scott Pilgrim. I feel like Kevin makes fun of me every time I bring up Scott Pilgrim, or whenever I mention something. He's like, he only loves a few things: volleyball, shoes, and Scott Pilgrim. So yes, I love Scott Pilgrim, but this was the first version that I did, and I think this is like maybe a good one to kind of touch upon proportions and face structures. So I did not expect to see this piece. So this is kind of neat. This is actually a version that I finished on during the workshop. The one on the left is one I finished during the workshop. So again, I'll write it. And at first, when I finished this piece, when I finished version A, I was like, man, I'm really happy with this. Dang, I finished this in I think about like maybe 1 hour and 45 minutes or so. Like I finished the coloring, the line work, all of it. Maybe I spent a little bit of time afterwards. But then I think I gave it a little bit of time. I stepped away from the drawing for maybe about a day. And then I came back to it and I looked at it and I was like, something about it feels off. Something about it is odd. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it at the moment. And so I started doing everything. I started zooming out, I started zooming in, I flipped the image around, I like flipped it upside down just to take a look at it. And the first thing that stood out to me was that the face, something about the face was just odd. Now, the face approach that I did here is kind of close to how I would normally draw. But I was definitely trying to push the muzzle or the face a little bit. And so I'll show you an example of a little bit of a closer up of like what I changed. And essentially what I did was I realized that I had pushed the muzzle too far out and that I had maybe elongated the eyes a little bit too much. So this goes then into what are some things I would check or how I would check it if I was drawing like a face. So after I've drawn a face, typically what I would do is if I feel like something's off, like in my gut, something feels incorrect, I'm going to lower the opacity of the drawing and I'm going to check the proportions. Now, depending on how stylized you do a piece, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one perfect, like if you're using the head mannequin to check your head proportions, it doesn't have to be perfect because if depending on how much you're stylizing it, you might have exaggerated, pushed things a little bit. And when you exaggerate and push things, there's a certain kind of energy or there's a certain kind of charm to it that you can't quite replace by being too technical. So if you're too technical and you change it up by, it's like, oh, well, the eyes are supposed to be down here or the eyes are supposed to be over here and this small, you're going to kind of lose a bit of that kind of improvised charm that you had in your drawing. So I'm saying that because like when you do face mannequin checks or figure proportion checks with the figure mannequin as well, just keep it in the back of your head that it's more of like a little grain of salt that you're using when you're checking your drawings. Just because the mannequin or the structure says the drawing is off, take it with a grain of salt and kind of adjust things a little bit, but don't adjust it too much for the sake of making it technically correct, because you might lose a bit of that je ne sais quoi, or like that little artistic improvised charm that you had in your drawing. But with that being said, when I check this drawing, this is kind of the mannequin head shape and skull that I had for this piece. I think maybe something like this. And as you can see, also this is how I would check it too. So I'm gonna quickly draw kind of like a head mask, like almost like a helmet over this piece, over my drawing, something like this. And I would try not to correct it as you're overlaying it. Try to trace exactly what you think you were going for when you were drawing this piece. And so now I've got the general skull. I'm gonna then put the center line and I'm gonna place like the muzzle out. So when I did this drawing, I do remember this as well while I'm doing this for stream, is that I wanted to push the muzzle out a lot, kind of to replicate a little bit of that Scott Pilgrim style, and also capture a little bit of that anime style where they push the muzzle out. And so this was kind of what I had. But the problem that I notice now is that something that I use to check whether the eyes are spaced out correctly is I will mark out where the brow is, and I'm going to mark out where the tear duct of the eye, and I'm going to look for where the tip of the bridge of the nose is going to be. And usually this creates kind of like a triangulated effect here, and over time you guys will kind of figure out the spacing that you like to curate the style or drawing that you like to go for. But I love looking for this piece right over there, and what it does is it kind of helps you figure out how far the nose is sticking out and how close the eyes are together and how maybe shallow the bridge of the nose is. And what I realize is that, oh, I pushed the muzzle, so the nose to the chin, too far out. I need to push it back in a little bit. And the eyes, and the reason why I need to push it in is because the eye spacing here, it was too wide for where the nose would have been. So you can see here that the drawing is pretty much exactly the same, but this time things are a lot tighter to the original mannequin head. So if I draw the exact same mannequin head here, you can kind of see how like the head shapes are the exact same, like the underlying mannequin head is the same. But you'll notice that if I were to trace out where this muzzle is for the nose, you'll notice that the muzzle here is way farther out, further away from the edge of the mannequin head here, versus this one is like almost right up and close. Like the nose and the muzzle is like really close to the mannequin head shape. So this is an example of how I check my heads, like my head shapes and form and structure. If I feel like something's off, I will retrace the head and just kind of check if things are like lining up the way I want it to line up. And like if I were to adjust it and make changes, would it set it into the proportions that I want it to be? So not to say that A and B are like, or like A is like way off or really, really wrong, but it's more so that I just didn't like the way the proportions and spacing was for A. I liked it better on B after I changed it. So I think I also like I pushed in the corners of the eye just a little bit. And I think I pushed the bridge of the nose in just a little bit more as well. So these are things that I just changed slightly and not too much. And also, of course, I changed like the shape of the eye as well. So this is how I changed this, or how I evaluated the head on this one, and how I would kind of track or check whether the if the error is a technical error, and if it is a technical error, what are things I need to kind of push and change for my drawing. Now, I would say that this is maybe a more advanced technique and check, but it is a good mindset to have no matter what skill you're at, is that you can always go back to your drawing that you think you've finished, and if you feel like something is off, usually check things like the angle of the brows, the alignment of the eyes, the center line of the face, and the overall structure of the head. Is it lining up with the facial features in the way that you think that they should be lining up in? And then this one's like an easy one. So when I first drew this, I kind of winged it where like this boulder or rock was going to be, and like roughly the height and size of the leg. This kind of feels like a little bit of like a fun artist's version of spot the differences. And at first glance, they feel kind of the same because the way I lined them up, they kind of feel similar. But you'll notice that the rock piece and the leg here is a little bit higher. So essentially, I took this rock. Whoops. I took a look at where the leg level was, and I was like, oh, if her leg was this far, this is the amount of distance this boulder rock would be from this leg. That's a really long distance. That like she is almost doing this, not a split, but her legs are like doing like an A kind of stance, like a power stance in a way. And I was like, that's just not how we would stand if we were stepping on something, or if we wanted our leg like pushed up a bit. So I needed it much closer. So I raised the height level of the boulder, and I also raised the height of the skating boot. She's a yeah, she is a giant. But you can see here, like these just small height changes makes the perspective a lot more believable. I would still say like maybe this is still too far, but I didn't want to redraw the whole thing too much. So I guess this is like another small tip that I would do, which is that ultimately, when it comes to art, it's always going to be a balance between technically is it correct versus artistically does it work. So it's like technically correct versus artistically works. And this is always something you are going to kind of debate amongst yourself when you're drawing. So technically, I would still probably have to move this leg a little bit more, and I would have to like maybe get it a little bit closer, but artistically it already kind of works. So if I show you the drawing here, if you look at it, it's not too big of a deal. And unfortunately, I had already like colored in a lot of the details around like the legs and around the thighs. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a subtle difference around like this area here. So this was the only thing I had to like redraw and kind of like touch up, like the shadows and the fold lines here and the details around here. But you'll notice that the leg, the block, everything is exactly the same, because all I had to do was essentially just lasso tool it and move everything up and shift things around. So I spotted this error, and I knew going in that the only thing I wanted to keep in mind was like, how can I make it work and do the least amount of changes? So make it work with the least amount of effort put in. Work smart, not harder with your changes. So if it works artistically, just kind of make the changes that would make it visually make sense. But use technicalities to check things. So to the technical part was like, oh, the block was just too low. It was too kind of like far down. So I had to move it up. And then artistically, it was like, okay, the only thing I just need to work on and change is this part over here. Everything else I can keep the same by just lasso tooling it. So that's kind of how I balance those things out. She's a if you ever put, yeah, that's true. The proportions here are also like very, very large. So again, it goes back to that thing, is like artistically versus technically. Like it's ultimately it's kind of up to you on how you want to balance those two things out. But I always feel like when it comes to changes and when you're critiquing your own pieces, these are the two things that you kind of just have to wrestle with or go back and forth with. And if you don't need to do too much work to change things, then I was like, take the easy route. Okay, oh, this is a little view as to like a personal piece that I'm doing actually for myself. So over here is the reference image from like Pinterest and everything. This is actually my first attempt here at the study, and now this is still a work in progress, the third piece over here. I'm still kind of working on this and rendering it out and everything. But the first attempt, I just didn't like the facial proportions. I didn't like the composition and the lighting of it. It was really more just like the study of it just didn't turn out the way I wanted to. So this is an actual example of one where I really, really wanted to tackle this, because I don't do a lot of shiny armor paintings, and I really wanted to tackle one. But I had painted this, I think, maybe around the beginning of the year, and then I put it down because it just wasn't working the way I wanted it to. And I finally decided to pick it back up around, like, I think maybe in November. End of November, I came back to this piece, and I decided I am going to reapproach the reference drawing, and I'm going to reapproach it completely. So I started completely from scratch. But this is kind of where the whole retrospective kind of point of critiquing can come in, where you look at how you approached something before, and you kind of ask yourself, okay, what did you do quote-unquote wrong? Or how, if you were to go about this piece again, how would you do it based on the new kind of experiences and knowledge that you have gained? So when I did this piece first, I was more focused on like having a more Ghibli anime big eye kind of style with the face. And at the time when I was working on this piece as well, I was very inspired by an artist called Mielgo. Oh shoot, I forgot his name. Alberto Mielgo is his name. He worked on the recent marathon trailer, like the cinematic marathon trailer. He did that one, and he worked on a lot of pieces on like Love, Death, and Robots. He has an amazing painting style, and I was trying to implement that same style and painting approach to this piece here, but it just wasn't clicking. It just wasn't working, especially with all the armor kind of reflectivity and the shine to it. So it just didn't, I just wasn't happy with it. So I put it down. And then when I reapproached it for the second one, for the bee drawing, my mentality had changed. I was like, okay, I don't really care too much about the whole anime Ghibli look. I still maybe kind of want to include it, but now I want to go for a different rendering approach, like the softness of it, the texture brush that I'm going for it, the type of visual noise, I'm going to approach it differently. So you can kind of see how like retrospectively and kind of coming back to a piece with new information, with new experiences and new knowledge, you can kind of change the approach completely different. The other thing too was, I think the first one that I did, I tried to copy the face angle a little bit more closer to the reference. But then as I was drawing the new one, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go for it. I'm going to go for more like a intense stare down. And the other thing too is like I'm going to pay attention a little bit more to the structure of the armor. How is the armor positioned on the character? So one thing that I did not account for in the original drawing is like how much the armor piece takes up. And I wanted to push and exaggerate the pose, but I didn't know where to push it and really exaggerate it. And for this piece, what I noticed, or like the way to make it work, is really the balance between the back and like this part right here. And so like, and also like the balance over here. So it really was all in the back area right here. Whereas like in the first drawing, I was really trying to balance all like the arms and all the details here. And like, whereas this one, I was really paying attention to like the balance of the head, the angle of the armor in the torso, and then the angle in the body. Whereas if I look at kind of like the balance here, everything kind of feels very straight. Everything feels very kind of like aligned. And whereas in this one, I put a little bit more effort and attention on like the different angles and changes in the figure. So these are some things that I do, and this kind of goes back to the fourth point that I had, which was redistribution of proportions. And this is something, or a technique, that I like to kind of teach my students a lot, which is alignment and balance. And for the most part, when you break down your figures, you can kind of break down figures into three sections. You have the head section, then you have the torso section, and lastly you have the leg portion. So how you angle these and how you space them out can really help to kind of make sure your drawing doesn't feel too stiff, because this is kind of what ended up happening here. Even though the arm was turned, even though the body looks like it's tilting, everything was just too perfectly aligned with each other. Whereas in this one, I paid a little bit more attention in redistributing the proportions and really paying attention to the angles in which that they're kind of leaning in. So that's kind of how, like, sometimes I guess I tackled a few things here, which is like coming back to an old piece. How do you retrospectively look at something and evaluate what you didn't like, what you liked, how you want to reapproach it now that you've done something already. And then also redistribution of proportions, just to make the design and the composition a little bit better. So that's this one, and we're almost done here. Okay, so this one is this is a piece that maybe some of you guys have seen before. This is an old one. I think this was done almost after my first year here at Wing Canvas, so this might have been like 2023, maybe. I might be off on the years, but I think maybe 2023. So over here I have kind of like the original rough version, and then I have a cleaned up version here. Now the reason why I brought this as an example is because Kevin actually before the stream asked me to kind of demonstrate like how I would check the mannequin or the figure for a drawing that I'm doing. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. This piece, I actually did that to kind of just check that the pose was good. And the reason why is because this first drawing here, I just kind of went at it. So this one here was very much, here, I'll write it kind of here, first attempt. This one was very improvised. There was like no planning. When I say no planning, basically I didn't do any like anatomical planning. So no planning anatomically. I just kind of went for it. I was like, oh, I really want this like cool pose. I want this dynamic action pose that she's doing. And I kind of want it to be like diagonal, like she's floating or she's jumped off from somewhere. So I kind of just went at it. Free, like very free flowing. Now, after I got the idea down, so this one, the second attempt here is where I took this drawing and I overlaid a mannequin on top of it to make sure that things are sitting where I want them to sit, meaning like the proportions for the body are looking the way that I want them to. So I'm going to show you how I did that with this piece. And maybe I'll show it first with this one. So this is what this drawing looks like if I overlaid a mannequin on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you kind of what I did with my Ramona Flowers character. So I just drew a very quick mannequin head. Mind you though, this piece is like what is it, like 3 years old almost, so there's some things I would like maybe reapproach or reevaluate for this. But this is kind of how I went about it. And then what I usually do, and this is very true of how I also approach just figure drawing in general, I like to map out where the shoulders are going to be, and then I like to map out the mannequin of the body. Now this one, I knew going in, I wanted it to be very like extreme or very like turned in a way. So I knew going in that I didn't want it to be too technical. So I knew I wanted the body to be longer. I knew I wanted the limbs to be longer. So even though it's like, yeah, it's technically or anatomically not correct to have the limbs be that long, I went into it with that intention, like purposefully making it so. And then here were like the knees. And so something like this, I think, is how I broke this piece down. So something like that is what I did. And then I will put like the shoulders here, and then the elbow, and then the hand. Same thing, have the elbow, shoulder, elbow. So I went about it like this. And I think at the time I looked at it and I was like, something about the torso or the positioning of the shoulders weren't quite there. So when I went back to it, I made sure, you'll notice that I think the chest area is very subtle and it might be kind of hard to pick up, but you'll notice that I tightened up the face, kind of, the head is not as wide as the original previous one. I repositioned the jawline a little bit and the alignment of like the chin. The eyes stay the same, but it's like the muzzle. Again, I'm redistributing kind of like the placement of the muzzle to make it a little bit just more natural. And then I also kind of shrunk the back of the head a little bit. So you'll notice that here there's a lot more like back of the cranium popping out over here, whereas this one I pushed it in a little bit more. So after I did like the mannequin drawing, tracing of my original rough, I noticed that the head was just a little bit too wide, or not wide, but a little bit too deep. So I pushed it back in. I pushed like the hair tie piece in a little bit as well. And then the other thing too was that I noticed that the chest was coming out a little bit too much. Like her rib cage was a little bit too wide. So again, I like pushed that in a little bit. So this is kind of a slightly newer version of how I wanted this body to kind of be tilting. And I can kind of like trace and track how I was like kind of thinking. Like it's been 3 years, like I said, since I've made this drawing, and you can kind of see how I laid out the clothing, and her outfit actually aligns with the torso and aligns with the mannequin. So you can see here like some things have kind of like changed as I'm working on this piece over time. And then I think I changed it one more time for like the final, like I reevaluated it just like a little bit more. So you can see here I pushed in her chest area a little bit. I kind of tightened up the position of the shoulders a little bit, and by redistributing kind of like her, I guess, figure features, I would have to also like shift the limbs and move the arms a little bit, change the angles and positioning so that there's no tangent points within the figure themselves. Like this was a tangent point here, like the hand just clipping and just blocking out the body was a little bit too tight, so I wanted it to be clearer how her hand is overlapping the body. So I had the arm, I think, like come out a little bit more, or I pushed the body out a little bit. So everything else is pretty much the same though, but this is usually how I reapproach how I approach like studying my own figure drawing to make sure that it works. And you can kind of see here all of the changes that I made and observed here. I then reapply it in the final attempt over here. So you can see how like the fingers just like is framed just here in the torso. That was like another change I made, and I think I had just like one finger come through so that it's clear how the hand is overlapping the body. I think I might have aligned like the pants over here, but everything is pretty much the same. Everything is based on how this one was, but I think I maybe still like changed the proportions of the body or the torso. But this is how I personally change my drawings to kind of, or how I personally kind of evaluate or study my drawings to make sure things are aligning the way that I want them to align. But yeah, hopefully that makes some sense. And then here is just some like my current pieces, or maybe not current, but like the most current pieces that I've done for I think this year. So you can kind of see how I'm kind of changing up the way I do, excuse me, the way I do like line work, and the way I'm kind of blocking things out is changing. So I kind of want to bring this up or show this just so that I always want to encourage all of you guys to try new things out. I think that's kind of like the biggest thing out there that not a lot of people kind of are willing to do, which is to experiment and apply the things that you learned in the previous years or in your previous drawings, and try to apply them as best as you can to your current studies and your current drawings. So you can see here like the line work, the shapes, the way that I block them out. It's kind of like evolving. Like these three pieces were drawn all this year. This one I did first, and then this one I did second, and then this one was done I think around fall. And you can kind of see how I'm taking the shape language that I learned here in designing this character, the way I'm blocking it out, I'm applying it to like, oh, changing it up completely. Like, oh, let's just play around with line work and let's see what happens here. And then I take kind of like a combination of those two things and I apply it to my drawing here. I kind of go like, okay, what did I like about my old pieces that I can then apply to this current one with the line work, with the shadows, with the way I block things out. Yeah, so this is kind of like more on line work, and then this is like I said, the current piece that I'm currently kind of still finessing and figuring out, kind of just practicing and working on my colors. So sometimes with self-critiquing, a lot of it is really more just like, okay, what can I push more on? What can I improve on? And colors never been like my strongest suit, but I'm always like, I feel like it's like, going back to like working out, you know how everybody's like, oh, guys only do arms and the guys never work on leg day and no one ever wants to do leg day. And I feel like I'm the same thing with art. Like I always work on line work, but I never work on colors. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do colors now. So I'm kind of like working on colors. Josh learns color arc. You know what's funny is that actually Sekiro asked me the same thing in class one time. It's just like, oh, you know, just learn colors, or like you can study these books to learn colors. And I was kind of thinking about it. I think it's less so about how to learn colors, but now I'm trying to figure out how I want to take the technicalities of colors and apply them to my own drawings. So it's less so about like how to render and how lighting and color theory works, but now I'm at the point where I'm like, just like the same thing with line work, there's so many different approaches to doing line work, like textures, noise versus no noise, traditional versus digital line work, thick versus thin, line weight, silhouette kind of trace outs. Like there's so many ways that you can render and approach line work, and I feel like it's the same thing with colors. There's so many different ways of applying colors to drawings, where I'm like, okay, let's see what I can do to like take the technical things that I know about colors and apply them in how I want to use them for colors. So that's, I think, the stage that I'm at, how to actually like using colors. Yeah, it's basically me learning to like colors, but also it's been some time, and you guys essentially here, this is kind of like a progress of kind of how my drawing styles have kind of changed over the years. Again, this was from like this year, this was from this year as well, but this was a little bit more current. So this was from like, I think, oh, I wrote it here. Yeah, it's like, this is like April. And then here is like basically, I think, beginning of December. Actually, this is a little teaser for an upcoming video that we're doing. So you get a little sneak peek as to like what this is. And then this is from, I think, let's see. Oh man, this is from March. Oh my gosh, of like this year. And then this one is like from, I don't think I wrote the date here because it technically wasn't done, but I'm pretty sure this was also done, like this was done I think last year. This was done I think November, and then now we're like here where this is like all this year. So, and then this is like now. This is the current piece that I'm doing now. And so I did mention at the beginning of stream, there is one little thing that I do. I don't necessarily recommend it, but this is something that I do when I have a piece that I'm drawing and I really, really like. And essentially what I do is I basically save my image and then I put it off onto my monitor on the side and I just kind of stare at it. So what I usually do is I'll put on the music that kind of like I'm vibing with, and I'll just put this image on the monitor on my side and just kind of leave it there. And I'll just kind of sit and kind of stare at it and kind of almost judge it non-stop. And I'm judging kind of like everything. So for example, this piece, if I were to like kind of judge it, I'm kind of like going like, did I put the ear in the right spot? Is it like too close to the corners of the eyes? Is it too far? Is it at the right height? Do I like the shape of the ear? And then it's like, oh, do I like the hair? Can I change it? Did I put everything, like the peaks of the hair, like the curls here in the right spot? Is the shadows like good? Can I add more shadows or use less shadows? So like these are things that I'm like kind of staring at and ask when I am, who am I? when I'm staring at these. And this is why this is like a bonus tip where I'm just like, I don't necessarily recommend it, but I do like doing this because then I really get to kind of just sit down and mull over what I like and what I don't like about the drawing. And essentially it was like, okay, that worked, that didn't work, that worked over there, that didn't work over there, and then what can I bring over to like my next drawings down the line. And I'm basically kind of also using the checklist that I have over there. So checking things like the eye sizes, make it like checking the nose, is the nose balancing the eyes, like all that kind of stuff. Like I'm being very, 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 very picky about like my drawings to kind of evaluate it. So making my wallpaper, that's a little, I don't think I can ever make my own drawings my wallpaper. I'm not, I feel like I've had a discussion with someone that I knew who asked me this, like, have you ever made your drawings like your phone wallpaper? And I'm like, I can't. It just feels weird making my own drawings my wallpaper. Like I like looking at it like on my, like separately on my monitor just to like admire like the amount of work that I put into a piece. But I don't think I could ever make it my wallpaper. But if you know, if people do make it your wallpaper, that's totally fine. I just can't do it. It feels weird for me to do it, but I know that some people can sometimes make it their wallpaper, but I can't do it personally. But yeah, that's kind of it. Hope you guys enjoyed this stream. I know that this one is a little bit different from the usual stuff that we do. Hope you guys learned a little bit on just like how I judge and critique my own pieces here. I do find that this is definitely caters a little bit more to like the drawing portion of it, because like I said, I don't usually color too much. I don't do too much rendering. I'll do it for like studies, but for my own personal drawings, character drawings, I'm usually more focused on line work and the design of the characters rather than the rendering of the colors. Like I'll just put on a flat color just to call it a day, but I won't really like render. And if you're like, wait, didn't you render stuff? If you look at my Samus piece, this is kind of like the extent in which I render. There's no like blending. Everything is very like sharp and kind of more like cell shaded. Like if you look here on the hand, there's really just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors in the hand here, or maybe like 5 colors just to render the hand. Everything else is very flat. Like if you look at the leg, it's just like the yellow, the dark blue, the lighter blue, and then just like the rim lighting on the side, on the edges, and that's kind of it. So I've never been someone to render colors. I've always been someone who is a bit more critical or picky about line work and design and shape languages. So hopefully this checklist here helps with that though, because I know that a lot of starting points for every artist is the drawing portion of it, and hopefully like this checklist helps you guys when you guys are evaluating your own drawings or trying to figure out like, did you draw it properly. But yeah, with that being said, that's kind of the end of the stream, end of our holiday stream in a way. I think Faye is doing one last stream before the end of the year, I think. But have a good holidays. Or that sounds weird. Have a happy holiday and have a good new year. Hopefully you guys do some good and special celebrating with your family or friends or those you care about during the New Year's, and have a safe celebration. And before we end off, as always, I'm gonna say our closing statements, and that'll kind of be the end of the stream, and we'll see you guys in the New Year's. So yeah, this is kind of goodbye, everybody. If you are just joining us, my name is Josh, and I'm one of the instructors here at Wing Canvas. And if you don't know who we are, at Wing Canvas, our mission is to make art education easily accessible to everyone. And you can join us for free live stream lessons on YouTube every week on Mondays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time and on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And level up your skills with our community of art nerds. And if you didn't know, we're more than just a YouTube channel. We're also an online school of illustration, visual storytelling, and dedicated to helping artists turn their passion into income. And a huge shout out to our amazing students and members for supporting our mission. We love seeing your incredible artwork and watching you grow in our classes and weekly critiques. And if you'd like to dive deeper, join our Discord to access stream notes, demos, and exclusive artwork, art challenges, and more free resources to help you improve. Come connect with your fellow art nerds and get inspired. And like I just said, these notes, I will include them on the Discord. I don't think maybe I'll include like every art piece there that I've kind of shared here, so you guys can take a look at them with also all the notes that I drew on top of my pieces. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy this stream. It was a little bit of a different special one, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And again, happy holidays and happy New Year's to all of you. Yeah, definitely hopefully you guys have submitted your pieces for Faye's roast. And yeah, that's kind of it. Have a good one, everybody. See you all later. Bye bye.